Imagine waking up on a Sunday morning to discover that, overnight, your city had been split in two. The streets you walked, the trains you took, the family ties and friendships you nurtured, all of it was suddenly divided by a barrier of barbed wire. This isn't a work of fiction, but the dramatic reality faced by millions of Berliners on August 13, 1961. What they witnessed was the rise of a brutal and unmistakable physical symbol of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. The construction of the wall wasn't just a historical event. It was a desperate act that cemented the division of a nation and a world into two opposing ideological blocs. It became the concrete scar of a conflict that, while lacking direct gunfire, was still a war of ideas, espionage, and power. The story of the Berlin Wall is a chronicle of lost freedom, human resilience, and an unyielding yearning for reunification. In this video, we'll dive into the details behind this barrier. We'll explore why it was built, how the decision was kept under strict secrecy, and, most importantly, the immense human cost it represented. By the end, you'll have a new perspective on how the history of a single wall shaped the destiny of millions and redefine the political landscape of the 20th century. To understand the need for the wall, we must go back a few years to the end of World War II. After the defeat of Nazi Germany, the victorious powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union, divided the country into 4 occupation zones. The same happened with its capital, Berlin, which, ironically, was located deep within the Soviet zone, more than 150 kilometers from the border with West Germany. This division, initially administrative, soon became the front line of a new conflict, the Cold War. While the Western powers promoted democracy and capitalism in their zones, the Soviet Union imposed a communist regime in theirs. Berlin became the focal point of this clash. Divided into 4 sectors, the city was an anomaly. The 3 western sectors merged to form West Berlin, an island of freedom and prosperity within the sea of communist East Germany. The Soviet sector became East Berlin, the capital of the newly formed German Democratic Republic (GDR). Although ideologically divided, the borders between the sectors of Berlin were largely open at first. People could move freely. However, this freedom created unsustainable tension. West Berlin, with its showcase of Western goods and economic opportunities, became a beacon for East Berliners. This stark contrast between the two sides of the same city would be the spark that ignited the crisis. As West Germany prospered economically with the help of the Marshall Plan, East Berlin and the rest of the GDR faced stagnation and political repression. For citizens of the GDR, West Berlin wasn't just a neighboring land, it was a route to freedom. They could simply take a train or tram, cross the internal Berlin border, and from there, fly to the west. This exodus became an existential problem for the East German government. Between 1949 and 1961, about 2.7 million people fled from the GDR to West Germany. This mass migration wasn't composed only of political dissidents, but also highly skilled professionals, doctors, engineers, teachers, and scientists. It was a true brain drain that was bleeding the East German economy dry, leaving factories without workers and hospitals without doctors. The situation was unsustainable, and the GDR government, under pressure from the Soviet Union, had to act. They needed to stop this human hemorrhage once and for all. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev considered West Berlin a thorn in the heart of East Germany. Negotiations with the Western powers failed, and the pressure to find a final solution grew. The decision to close the Berlin border was made in absolute secrecy, known only to the highest levels of the Soviet and GDR governments. They knew a public announcement would cause panic and a desperate rush to the border. The plan, therefore, had to be executed without warning, quickly and quietly. The fateful moment arrived. In the early hours of August 13, 1961, while most Berliners were asleep, the East German army, police, and worker militias began assembling the first version of the wall. They used barbed wire and concrete blocks to block streets, subway tracks, and tram lines that connected the two sides of the city. When the sun rose, Berlin was unrecognizably divided. The initial reaction of the population was one of shock and disbelief. Entire families were separated without warning. Parents in East Berlin could no longer visit their children in West Berlin, and vice versa. Workers who lived in the East but worked in the West were prevented from going to their jobs, losing everything overnight. The barbed wire was just the beginning. In the weeks and months that followed, the GDR government built a more robust and permanent barrier. The initial structure was replaced by a concrete wall over 3 meters high, stretching more than 150 kilometers around West Berlin. But the wall itself was only part of a complex security system. In reality, the barrier was double, with the space between the two walls known as the Death Strip, or no man's land. This strip was a deadly labyrinth of traps, guard towers with armed soldiers wielding machine guns, bunkers, guard dogs, and even electric fences and landmines in some sections. The guards' orders were clear and brutal: shoot to kill. Despite all the difficulties and the risk of death, the desire for freedom was stronger for many. Stories of escape attempts became legends. People tried jumping from apartment windows near the border, digging tunnels, flying in improvised hot air balloons, or even swimming across the Spree and Havel rivers, which formed part of the border. One of the most famous stories is that of soldier Hans Conrad Schumann, photographed leaping over the barbed wire during his dash to freedom. Each successful escape was an act of courage, but tragically, many ended in disaster. Over the walls, 28 years of existence, hundreds of people died trying to flee to the West. The construction of the Berlin Wall was a shocking event, but its legacy goes far beyond the history of the Cold War. It was the physical and cruel symbol of the ideological divide between communism and capitalism, wound in the flesh of a city and the soul of a people. The wall became a daily reminder that freedom is not guaranteed, and that the pursuit of it can come at the highest price. Its fall on November 9, 1989, was a global celebration, but the impact of the Berlin Wall never fully disappeared. It left us with an indelible lesson about the fragility of peace, the importance of unity, and the relentless power of the human spirit. The wall no longer exists, but its history remains as a powerful warning to future generations about the dangers of division and tyranny. If you were moved by the story of separation and resilience, please like this video to help us share more stories like this. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next explorations of pivotal moments in history. And to continue your journey, click the video that appears now on the screen to discover another chapter that changed the world forever. Thank you so much for watching.